trying to take our place among the gods, but we lack the ability or knowledge of gods to manage the consequences of what we do. You know, scientists divide the Earth's history into geological epochs. You know, the Holocene, the Miocene, the Eocene, the Pleistocene. And the Nobel Prize winner Paul Crutzen has said that this should be called the Anthropocene epoch, a time in Earth's history when humans have become a geological force. But now we have scientists and supercomputers who have been telling us for more than 40 years, looking back over the knowledge we've accumulated and projecting what they know into the future. Scientists have been telling us we are headed down a very dangerous road, that there are opportunities by shifting direction and moving along a different path. They are acting in the best tradition of our species, using our knowledge, looking ahead, seeing where the dangers lie and the opportunities are, and telling us how to change direction. But now, at this critical moment, we are turning our backs on the very strategy that got us to where we are today. Now we'd say, oh, I don't believe you. Humans couldn't be that powerful. Or we say, it'll cost too much, it'll destroy the economy to do what you're telling us we have to do. If we are going to truly recognize the challenges we face so that we can begin to address them, we have to be able to look out at the world and see it as it really is and where our place is in it. And here is where I think we have the biggest challenge of all. You see, we all belong to a single species. Our sensory organs, our neurons, our brains are all the same. But when we look out at the world, we see very different things, because the way we see the world is shaped by such things as gender, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic position. All of these things shape the way we see the world. I mean, you just have to talk to a street person on Bay Street in Toronto and a banker and talk to them about the economy or money, and you'll get radically different responses. I visited a small village in the Andes Mountains in Peru a few years ago, and I learned that the children there are taught that that mountain is an Apu. Apu in their language means God. And as long as that Apu casts its shadow on their village, it will determine the destiny of everybody in that village. Imagine how those children, when they grow up, treat that mountain compared to a kid in Trail, British Columbia, who's taught all his life, I'll bet those mountains are full of gold and silver. The way we see the world shapes the way we treat that world. For most of human history, we perceived the world in a very limited way. We were local, tribal animals. That's for 99% of our existence. We're a local, tribal animal. We didn't even have to worry whether there were people on the other side of an ocean, over a mountain, or across a desert. We only had to worry about our local tribe and our tribal territory. But now we've changed. But even in 1900, there were only 1.5 billion people, and there were only 16 cities with more than 1 million people. London in 1900 was the largest city with 6.5 million people. Tokyo was the 7th largest city with 1.5 million people. The vast majority of people around the world lived in rural village communities. That's because most people in the world were involved in some aspect of farming. We were a farming species. And farmers, like the people for most of human history, local tribal people, farmers know we're deeply embedded in nature. Farmers know that we are absolutely dependent on weather and climate for our well-being. They know that the amount of moisture in the soil in the summer is directly related to the amount of snow you get in the winter. Farmers know that insects are vital for pollinating flowering plants. They know that certain species of plants can take nitrogen from the air and fix it as fertilizer in the soil. Farmers know we are a part of nature and absolutely dependent on it. Cut ahead 100 years to the year 2000. Now there are 4 times as many people, 6 billion people in the world, but there are over 400 cities with more than 1 million people. The 10 largest cities all have more than 11 million people. Tokyo in the year 2000 was the largest city in the world with 26 million people. We have switched then, fundamentally, especially in the industrialized world, from a farming animal to a big city dweller. In countries like Canada and Australia, over 85% of us now live in big cities. And I guess I would count Moncton as a city, not a big city. But in an urban setting, it's easy to think, oh, we're not part of nature. We're so smart, we create our own habitat. We build cities. You know, we're not like other creatures. And as long as we have parks out there where we can go camping and play, we don't need nature. Who needs nature? I have a friend in Toronto who lives in the outskirts of Toronto in a high-rise apartment building, completely air-conditioned. He says in the morning he goes down the elevator into the basement, into his car, which is air-conditioned, drives down the Don Valley Freeway into downtown Toronto, into the basement of a commercial building, up to his office, which is completely air-conditioned. That office building is connected through a whole series of tunnels to massive shopping malls and food marts. And he said to me, David, I don't have to go outside for weeks on end. Who needs nature when we build our own habitat? So now, in a city then, our understanding, our preoccupation becomes our job. Because with a job, you earn money to buy the things that you want. And in focusing then on our priorities, which is our jobs, we forget the most fundamental reality. And that is, we are still animals. And I gave a lecture years ago in Austin, Texas. And there were a lot of children in that meeting, and they were all sitting in the front. So when I finished my talk, I said, now kids, if you remember one thing from my talk today, please remember we are animals. Man, did their parents get pissed off at me. Don't you dare call my daughter an animal. We're human beings. So we think that we're superior to these other creatures, that we're different from them. You can tell by the way we talk about other animals. If you call another person a chicken, or you say you're a pig, or an ape, or a snake, or a worm, these are insults, because we think we're superior to those animals. I went to a store in Calgary a few years ago. There was a big sign on the front window. It said, "No animals allowed." And I went in and I told the owner of the store, I said, you enforce that, you're not going to have any customers. He didn't know what the hell I was talking about. He thought I was nuts. We are animals, and we forget what my First Nations brothers and sisters have taught me for so many years now. That we are animals and that we are created out of Mother Earth. And at first I thought they were speaking poetically or metaphorically, until I realized they mean it literally, that we are created out of the 4 sacred elements of earth, air, fire, and water. And we've forgotten that. And we've forgotten a very, very important reality. Think about this. What was the first thing every one of us needed the minute we left our mother's body? Well, of course, the answer is a breath of air. That first breath was to inflate our lungs and then announce our arrival on earth. And from that time on, to the last breath we take before we die, we need air every minute of our lives. And we don't even think about it. I want you to reflect just for a couple of minutes now on that very simple act. 2 to 3 liters of air deep down into the most intimate, moist, warm parts of our bodies. If you've ever seen a fresh set of lungs and touched it, you know, it's that kind of squishy, mushy, very funny texture to it. Lungs have that funny texture because they're mainly made of air. Our lungs have an average of 300 million alveoli or capsules, and they're clustered like grapes around an alveolar duct. And we need 300 million of them to give the surface area to come into contact with the air. If you flattened out all of the alveoli in 2 dimensions, the alveoli in a set of lungs would cover a tennis court. That's how much surface is all wrinkled up in our lungs. And each alveolus is lined with a 3-layered membrane called a surfactant that reduces surface tension, so when the air hits it, it sticks or fuses. And instantly carbon dioxide from our bodies rushes out, oxygen and whatever else is in the air rushes in. Hemoglobin molecules and red blood cells grab onto the oxygen, and each beat of our hearts drives that oxygen to every part of our bodies. And when you breathe out, you don't breathe all of the air out of your lungs. That would collapse your lungs. About half of the air stays in your lungs even when you exhale. So the point I want to make is you can't draw a line and say air ends here and I begin there. There is no line. Air is in us, it's stuck to us, and it's circulating through our bodies. We are air. There is no distinction. So what environmentalists thought, and I thought this in the 70s and 80s, the environment out there and we are here, and we've got to regulate the amount of interaction, how much we can remove and how much we put back. There is no environment out there. We are the earth. We are the environment. When I breathe the air out of my nose, it mixes in this room and goes straight up your nose. When I say this to kids, I always see a couple of kids go, "Oh, yuck." I guess they think they have a little bubble of air that belongs to them. We are air. And if I am air and you are air, I am you. We are a part of a matrix, that thin layer of air that circulates around the planet. And we are connected not only with all other human beings, but with the trees and the birds and the worms and the snakes that are all a part of that wonderful element, that sacred element called air. There's a wonderful thought exercise the American astronomer Harlow Shapley did many years ago. He said, let's follow one breath of air. How do you do that? You know, air is 98% oxygen and nitrogen. You breathe it in, oxygen and nitrogen go in your body. A lot of the oxygen never comes back out. That's why we have to have air every minute for the oxygen. 80% of the air is nitrogen. Goes into your body. Some of it reacts chemically in your body and doesn't come out. But 1% of the air is an element called argon. Argon is an inert gas. It doesn't react chemically with anything. You breathe it in, goes into your body, breathe it out, comes right back out. So argon is a very good, what scientists call marker or indicator for a breath of air. It's 1% of the air. How many atoms of argon in one breath of air? Shapley calculates 3 followed by 18 zeros. 3 billion atoms of argon in each breath of air. That's a lot of argon. So if we follow one breath of air that comes out of my nose, very quickly, within minutes, every one of you is breathing gazillions of argon atoms from that one original breath. But there are leaks under the doors there. The doors will open. Eventually that one breath will go across Moncton, across New Brunswick, across Canada, around the world. And according to Shapley, 1 year later, no matter where you are in the world, because air is a single system, every breath you take will have about 15 argon atoms from that one original breath taken a year before. So on that basis, Shapley calculates every breath you take will have millions of argon atoms that were once in the bodies of Joan of Arc and Jesus Christ. That every breath you take has argon atoms that were in the bodies of dinosaurs 65 million years ago. That every breath you take will suffuse life forms as far as we can see into the future. So air, surely air should be thought of as a sacred substance that gives life